Hi everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar for the Sicon Projects module for Sage 200. Our demonstration today is a continuation of our series of webinars highlighting Sicon Sage 200 integrated modules. Joining me once again is Michelle Duford from Sicon, who will dazzle us with both her and Sicon's brilliance. Hi Michelle, can you hear me okay?
I'm good, Howard, thank you.
My name, of course, is Howard Murphy, and I'm Business Development Manager for DB Computers. Both Sicon and DB Computer Solutions are here to understand what your requirements are and what level of solution is best suited to your business. As mentioned, Michelle will be giving you an overview of this actual product today, but we'd be very happy to organize a one-to-one session where we can properly talk to you about your business and offer you a fuller demonstration based on your needs. So just to talk very briefly through some of the key features before I let Michelle take you through the module. Sicon, I have SFDC at the top, it should be Sicon Projects, apologies. But you can see here, negates the need to store and report on project costing data outside of Sage 200. It's all live real time within Sage 200 itself. As the actual transactions are updated throughout the actual project, they'll reflect throughout Sage 200. They're very simple and easy to set up. Sicon have actually built it so that you can have some predefined project templates to try and help you set up your own later on. As with all the Sicon modules, it's fully integrated with Sage 200 itself. So effectively, it's hard to see the seams between the two. And so for all, as you'll see through the actual demonstration, for all purposes, you'll generally not notice the difference whether you're in Sage 200 or Sicon, because it's actually all within the one package itself. So finally, before I hand you over to Michelle, what I would remind you to put forward any questions in the Q&A or through the chat itself. We'll do our level best to give you the answers at the end of the actual session. I'd also point out, if you are for the shared screen that we're giving you there, if it's too small, I'd ask you just select view at the top and choose focus on content and choose view full screen as well to give you the best view overall to help you along. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Michelle, who will share the screen, if that's okay with you, Michelle.
No problem at all, guys. You can now see my screen, I hope. Just confirm for me that you can.
Let's see. I'll see if I can see it myself. I can. Yeah, I can.
Excellent.
I can see it. Yay.
Fabulous.
Result.
So look, guys, the reality is that just to extend on what Howard has just given us, the project solution from Sicon sits integrally inside of Sage. It is designed to allow you to have one single holistic view of all of your costs and all of your revenue, for you to be able to determine how profitable your engagement is with a client on a project, with multiple clients on a single project, in a variety of different ways. So depending on how you use the system will depend on what projects means to you. You may be the type of organisation that's heavily involved in construction. Projects makes perfect sense to you. You might be a service-related company, and again, with jobs that need an understanding of whether or not you need to get more revenue next year because you're spending too much this year on servicing your customer. Projects is ideal for that. But you could also be that sort of organisation that is either financially based, or potentially you're a marketing company, or you're a consultancy service, where having a solution that will provide you with the ability to be able to see all of your costs in relation to your revenue is important. From a marketing perspective, you might just say, here's my marketing initiative. That's a project in my terminology. So every time I spend money that relates to that particular marketing campaign, I want to be able to associate it to that entity. So projects is not a one size fits all, but it is a solution that fits many scenarios. So we're going to have a quick look at my project list first. So as Howard has already told us, it sits integrally inside of Sage. So no upload, no import, no export that's required in order for me to be able to see that level of information. Many customers will have done something to their nominal structure to allow them some degree of project related reporting, which essentially extends your nominal structure sometimes to be very, very busy and sometimes to be very unruly and unmanageable, because you've created a beast to be able to manage a process which isn't naturally sitting inside of finance. It's more about being able to see that alongside finance. So one nominal code, but 25 projects or 2,500 projects that would relate that information back to a single place in your finance system. So we're going to have a look in my project list first. You'll see the projects module sits as part of the Sage menu. Lots of settings that sit in the background to determine how you might want to use it. I'm not going to bore you with every one of them today. There's not enough time for me to do that. So book another appointment and then I'll bore you with all the settings then. In my project list, you'll see a list of projects. You'll see some of my projects have an automated numbering system attached to them, so the system can automatically generate the next project number in line. Some of my projects don't have that. Some of my projects, I've actually gone in and created what the project number is so that I can make them specific so that we can search on what they might be. I've got a project in here. These list views are wonderful. They're standard Sage type list views, but they can be filtered down, as I'm sure you're aware, so that you can see the most relevant information. So for instance, if I just wanted to see information for projects which are being managed by Harry, it'll filter my list of projects by project manager. Perfect. If, however, we only wanted Harry to be able to see his projects, then there are utilities inside of the project solution that do indeed enable me to only allow Harry to see his stuff. So these user lists or team lists would essentially enable me to see just my projects, just those which I am the project manager for. In that scenario, you'd actually switch off the ability for them to see all of the projects and only give them permission to see their project list. And you could also do that by team. So again, it makes navigation inside of Sage nice and easy and gives your employees some autonomy in terms of what you are going to allow them to be able to do without letting them see all of your data. So all very much permissions based. In my project list, we're going to go into my documents test project because that's where I've got quite a lot of data. And we're just going to run you through what the system is going to allow me to collate into one single view. So the very first screen that we see when we open up a project is what we call the project totals screen. So there's a couple of little different versions of this depending on what you want to be able to see, but in simple terms, it is your revenue versus your costs, and therefore how much, so in other words, costs, revenue minus costs equals how much money am I making, how much margin am I making. This is a good example of a project that's making money. We've got more revenue coming in than we do costs going out. When we design a project, and these can be designed on templates as well, we're also designing it to give us that level of reporting that we want. There's, in my terminology, that's called a header. So my examples are expense, labour, materials and plant. You may have only expense or labour and materials. They might be the only two things that you want to be able to report on. But equally, you might say, actually, mine's way more extensive than that, Michelle, and there's about 100 different things that we want to be able to report on, and you can design them. It is your library of headers for you to determine. Behind each header, you have the ability to budget for that element of the project, so that it means that I can see that I've got a £200,000 budget here for materials. I can see how much we're committed to spend, purchase orders, how much we've actually spent, purchase invoices, and therefore a total compared to my budget, how much have I got left? £141,000 left out of my £200,000 budget. That is the key information that I need to be able to see as a project manager to see whether or not I'm on track. As you will probably notice, as we hover over these little numbers, they turn into little hyperlinks. So I could drill into the detail behind each one of those and use this as my dashboard. So if I want to see the purchase invoices against materials for project document test, there are each of those elements coming through for you. These are standard Sage transactions. We're not doing anything different to that. The structure of your project could be, as mine is, project versus header. And I don't need anything further than that. Then what we can do is actually apply to this a number of filters. So I could say, just show me all of the costs which are related to a particular header. So if I just change that to be just for materials and we apply that, it will then take out all of the other expenditure and just show me all of the costs related to materials. Likewise, if we start to look through these tabs, because this is basically all of these tabs is the underlying data of what makes up these transactions. So if I look at my expenditure, you can see that all the ones that I've got here are materials related. You'll notice that I also have another one in here called Screed, and that Screed is actually a subheader to my main project header type. Ultimately, it means that I can go one step further down, have materials as my project header type, and then each of the materials that sit underneath that if I really wanted to. The level of reporting is down to what you want to be able to get out of it. Just going to take out my filters. I'm just going to show you a couple more filters in here, guys, because not only can we obviously filter by header, we can filter by date range. We can filter by accounting period because it's completely and tightly integrated into the accounting system manager. We can do it by project group. We can do it by transaction type. We can do it by nominal type. We can do it by supplier. There's a whole ream of different filters that you can apply to give you a different result. So we love this screen. And we think it's a great way of you being able to see the information that you want to be able to see, real live reporting. However,
the hyperlinks, Michelle, are great. You know, every time, you know, we show these to clients, it's, you know, just the ability to be able to drill in that particular manner is.
I think you're absolutely right, Howard. I think it's the drillable data that becomes very powerful, because it's in here that I want to be able to see that top level, but I don't want to have to navigate elsewhere to go and research that. I just want to be able to click that and say, what's that made up of?
I think it's also to do with the fact that, you know, a lot of people sort of associate dashboards, you know, to this type of drill effect that you can do through the actual data. Whereas when you're actually working with it within the actual product itself, you know, it's great to be able to use the same kind of functionality. I think that really sort of resonates to.
And that leads me on very nicely. It leads me on very nicely, Howard, to the next point that I was going to make. This is what we call the working dashboard, my project's totals. But however, there are a number of different areas that you may well decide to configure because your particular focus, your interest in that project is of a particular type. So, for example, in here, under the projects banner, I have the ability to configure dashboards. They're SQL queries when all said and done, but it is a dashboard of data which is live reporting. So rather than running a report which is only valid at the point at which you run it, this is a live position from a dashboard. And these dashboards, you can have 10 that you can configure. We give you a couple that we've configured out of the box. There's SQL queries, and ultimately, if I just show you my project dashboard 1, this is just an example of what you could achieve. So if your own responsibility is all about the revenue and where that revenue is coming from in all of your projects, then I have a dashboard here that gives me my project revenue across all projects, committed revenue, actual revenue, total revenue. However, these forms can, if you need them to be, depending on which type of dashboard you're going into, they can be, what's the word I'm looking for? They can allow you to perform certain functions depending on what type of dashboard that has been created. So in this particular dashboard, it's my project revenue, and the other panel that I've got over here is my outstanding subcontractor payments. Live position. Let's have a look at another type of dashboard. I've got my public liability and my outstanding sales applications. So if this is part of our construction solution, which sits alongside projects, guys, but there's a number of different things that you might want to be able to achieve in here. And this is basically what you get. This is what these 4 panels, and I can go in here and I can configure those panels to pick up the SQL queries essentially that I'd like to appear in those panels. So dashboards are more than possible. We think we give you a lot of information in lots of different places, but they're all there available for you to be able to configure. Let's pop ourselves back into that project one more time. I want you to be able to see what the underlying data is that makes up that project total screen where we can drill. So all of my revenue, we know that revenue is made up of potentially quotations if you want to be able to include them, orders, invoices. If you're in the construction industry and you have the construction module, you can also do applications as well. In my expenditure, my purchase ledger invoices, my journals, my purchase orders, they're all here for me to be able to see the detail. And again, and I'm not sure whether or not I like the term, Howard, but they're drillable, if that's even a term. So in here, when we highlight that and we right click on it,
I don't know any other term, being honest.
Good. I'm glad drillable is a word that we're going to use today. So in here, as you can see, I've right clicked on that. It's now taking me into the supplier transaction inquiry screen for that particular invoice. We can drill further down to look at what that means in terms of nominal postings for that invoice. And if there's any related information in here that I need to be able to see, I can see it without having to leave my project. I also have the ability for me to be able to see revenue, expenditure, timesheets. Time is calculated based on direct input into projects, imports, or we also have tools, and which are part of this whole process for DB to display to you what the art of the possible is with the additions that go with Sage 200. Guys, there are utilities that enable your guys to be able to submit their timesheets, have them approved, and they'll automatically hit the project.
I was going to jump in earlier on, but I didn't want to steal your thunder, Michelle.
It's all right.
But just on that point, sorry for interrupting. What everybody should be aware of, as I said, this is a series of webinars that we've actually run using the Sicon integrated modules with 200. A lot of them are not just integrated with Sage 200, but with each module that's there. So please feel free to take a look at the webinars on the channel, specifically for the likes of the Sicon documents, which is a method of actually recording documents against each of the actual transactions within each ledger. Also, at one point we'll get through some of the Sicon approvals, which you mentioned there a moment ago, for trapping timesheets and purchases and so on.
Perfect. Thank you, Howard. So just in terms of direct labor, the projects module has the ability for you to be able to manage your employees. So each employee, Lewis in this case, is set up as an employee. He has X amount of information attached to him. Who is he? Where does he sit? What does he do in our company? But he then has 3 elements: his cost rates, his charge rates, and his pay rates. You can have, as standard, there's 15 of them that come out of the box. You can have 15 different rates for cost, for charge, and for pay. But actually you can have up to 120. There's an all manner of different companies that acquire other companies and have to 2P over their staff and maintain the way in which somebody's paid. So for that reason, you can have pretty much as many different pay rates and cost rates and charge rates as you need to have by person. So behind Lewis, we know that Lewis is costed at a particular rate per hour, so that when we put his time on, it will automatically calculate that for me to be the total cost. You'll also notice against our timesheets that we have committed cost versus actual cost. So I can plan for time that Lewis is going to spend. And then when he actually spends the time, it will move from being committed to actual. In my stock, we have the ability for you to be able to issue stock directly to a project. There are some lovely utilities that are also going to allow you to be able to transfer stock to a project. Not part of the project module. We've got some other modules that sit alongside it. Why wouldn't we? But the stock transfer module literally allows me to have all of my stock in my yard, as an example, and then when it's required on site, I can issue it to that project, but I can also make the physical movement of pick, pack and dispatching it out of my yard and receiving it on site. It's called stock transfers. All of those things can be achieved, but in real terms, as far as our project is concerned, we're most interested in how much it's actually cost us to issue that. So the cost of the actual components. We then have within projects the ability for you to be able to manage your own plant, which we treat very much the same as we do as an employee. So it has a cost associated to it and potentially a timesheet associated to it that would associate its cost to my project. But in addition to that, we also have hired in plant. In the hired in plant, that's actually going to give you a utility all by itself, part of projects, that enables you to be able to raise a purchase order on the supplier that's going to provide you with the product, to cost for that against my project, but also to manage the communication to the hire company, the on hire and off hire process. We're going to have a little look at this in just a second, guys. And then obviously the ability for me to be able to say that's now completed at the rate at which we have costed it. So we might have planned to hire it for 5 days, but unless you off hire it, they'll continue to bill you for it. So it will continue until it is physically off hired. We can manage the communication back to the hire company to tell them to come and get it. But it may well be that what you planned for isn't what actually happened, and you've actually incurred costs of 15 days. And all of that can be adjusted accordingly. When we're planning a project, when we're designing what a project looks like, what do those headers look like? What do our budgets look like? We can also plan for purchases. So this is not quite a purchase order yet. This is what we think we might need in order to complete this project. And then there are utilities that will allow me to be able to convert my planned purchases to purchase orders, so that I can see what we planned for, what we've actually done. So now I've got one step further back. So I can compare my materials budget to what we've planned to purchase, to what we've committed to purchase, to what we've actually purchased. All of that's more than achievable. We have a view of who my customer is. This is a particular project that has a single revenue source, but actually it doesn't matter. If you don't have a single revenue source and you have multiple customers bringing you revenue for a single project, then again, you can have as many different ones in here. You can see I've actually got Abbey Retail, Better Kitchens, Cherry and Acme, all of which are giving me revenue for this project. Just going to have a quick look at my project summary. This is a very important one for those of you that have a requirement to look at true cost valuation reconciliation. So CVR reporting. There is a CVR utility that sits within our project solution. So in here, we can actually define how much percentage complete by period we are. We can go in and edit the cost at completion. I'm going to talk to you about phases and stages and activities in just one second, guys, but let's just choose my activity in here. And in the cost to completion, I can manage my revised forecast. How much are we anticipating that we're going to spend over and above the budget? because we have an overrun, for instance, or a variance or some kind of variation. It means also that I'm not only going to be able to revise my forecast, but I'm also going to be able to accrue for the costs within that period. And not just the costs, I can do that for revenue as well. When you run your cost at completion utility and your revenue at completion utility, that will do your accruals postings, and your CVR report that comes off the back of it will give you one single view of all of your projects and what has been accrued for. All again, more than possible. Last couple of things which may not be relevant to all of you. Pretty much our project solution kind of stops here. This is projects. Everything beyond, previous to the project summary screen, is pure projects. Everything else that you're seeing is, as Howard has alluded to, talking to other applications, other modules that we have inside of the Sage environment to manage other things like manufacturing, like service, like construction for retentions, applications, like our fixed assets. And there's even the ability for you to be able to create tasks against a project through our CRM utility. So any of these that you need to have a look at separately, you absolutely can. One of the things that Howard alluded to was the Sicon documents. As you can see here, in one single place, I'm seeing all Sicon documents that relate to this project. Purchase orders, purchase invoices. There might be even some stock item images that all relate to the transactions against this project and this project only. So when we go and view that document, it will allow me to see the document attached.
Which is pretty impressive. And it's, you know, again, just to highlight the fact that, you know, you can match your purchase invoices here and, you know, using this. And you can also, you know, with the projects piece, stop me if I'm wrong, Michelle, can't you link them to multiple projects as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're going to, in just one moment, we're going to put a brand new invoice on, and we're going to say it's a £1,500 invoice and it relates to 3 projects. £500 here, £500 here. So we're doing it as one transaction, but it's actually putting the costs in a reportable entity against the individual projects. So we're going to do that in just a second. So like I say, manufacturing, works orders, we've got a contracts module. Again, any of these which are of interest to you, we can talk to you about separately. But the whole idea of projects is that it underpins that ability for you to be able to see one single view of the truth across your business. So when we do set up a project, this is kind of the header detail of my project. In here, what you're really doing is saying, this is how I would like to be able to report on my project, and these are all of the things which are important to me. So when we set up a project, like I say, it can either be automatic numbering, or you can type your own project number in. You'll have a description, a customer name, potentially. You'll have a project manager, a currency, a chargeable type. It's a whole ream of different things that you can add to the system at this point. Analysis codes. The idea of a project is I'm going to be able to see how much I've spent on materials on that project. But by adding this level of analysis codes in here as well, what I might want to do is say, do you know what? What I really want to do is see how much I've spent on materials on projects of a particular type. So I've got an analysis code that says project type. I've got a number of different verticals. And off the back of that, I'm going to be able to then run a report or create a dashboard to show me all costs against the particular headers for any of those analysis codes. So what you might have is project type, a region, the project manager. So my report says, how much have I spent on materials on projects which are in the commercial sector that are in the southeast that have this person, Harry, as the project manager. That's the level of detail that you're going to be able to get, therefore, out of the system. At header level, we can set objectives. We can also add any notes that we need to, site addresses, I'll come back to project levels in just a second. Your project headers, as I mentioned earlier, are a library of headers of your own design. Against those headers, you can create a default for where it's going to post to in your nominal ledger. And it may be that everything that sits under materials, whether or not it's screed or bricks or plaster or whatever it might be, that you want to be able to report on at this level, all goes to the same nominal in your finance. But I can override that default by project if I needed to. In here, we're going to be able to go in and maintain the budgets. So you can go in and see the overall budget. You can design your budget, and these budgets can be imported in as well. Your billing profile, your variations, your risk assessments and method statements can also be captured in here. Any memos, any attachments, and if you are construction related, any construction detail for retentions and applications. And if you're working in Southern Ireland and you're paying subcontractors, then we also have the ability to talk to the ROS with your RCT contracts being attached to your projects. This is quite an important one because ultimately it means that we're going to be able to manage that process of talking to the Irish Revenue for you and calculating how much the deduction is going to be for your subcontractors before you physically pay them. So there is an online connection to the Irish Revenue that we can provide. In here, what you're basically doing is saying, here are my subcontractors that are working. That's a requirement in Southern Ireland from the Irish Revenue. In the UK, HMRC aren't quite so diligent about that. They just say, you know, is it 20%? Is it 30%? Is it at the higher or the lower? Give them the UTR information and you're going. For the Irish Revenue, they need to know that the subcontractor is actually connected to your project. Again, if it's not relevant to you guys, we won't harp on about it too much, but you can see all of the functionality is there for you to be able to verify your subcontractors to the Irish Revenue, should you wish to. Okay, so my header level, I promised you I'd come back to the project levels. The project levels are designed for you to be able to say, here's my project, here are the headers, how much have I spent on labour? But if we want to go one step further than that, we can create a hierarchy within the project, which is my phases, stages and activities. In actual fact, you can call them whatever you like. For me, as you can see, I have at the top level a phase, which is groundworks. I then have a stage, which is foundations, and an activity, which is my footings. And then I have a number of planned purchases. Everyone needs a kettle and a scissor lift when they're doing the footings, that ultimately are then associated to that level of detail. And so when you put on a transaction, when you do create projects which have that project levels attached to them, every transaction you put into Sage, because this is 100% reconciliation, when you put on a purchase ledger invoice, it will say which project, which phase, which stage, which activity does this transaction relate to, so that your reporting is completely accurate. The other thing that you can also do, rather than going into standard Sage and putting on a purchase invoice as an example, I'm still in standard Sage, but we have a mechanism to stay in my project in order to actually do the transactions that relate to the project at that level. So in here, when I go back into my groundworks, when I look back at my project, when I look down to my activities, you can see at activity level, which is the lowest level, I can add a standard Sage transaction, either a sales ledger invoice, a credit note, a purchase ledger invoice or credit note, a sales order processing, sales order return or quote, purchase order processing, order or return. I can issue stock to the project. I can even add time for my Sicon employees. I can add operations. This is your planning for work to take place. I can add planned purchases, add plant hire, create issues, RFCs, tests. So in here, we're just going to simply put on a brand new invoice. So let's just go in here and put on an invoice. Select my supplier. My supplier today is going to be these guys. Who should we have? Let's have these guys at BGT. So now creating my invoice, it's the same screen that you have inside of Sage 200. I would be going in, entering in a purchase invoice and then selecting the supplier. Here, I've selected the supplier and it knows instantly that it's going against that project, against that materials, against that particular phase, stage and activity. So
it reads the context effectively of what you're in then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just that association making life easy. Doesn't mean to say that you can't do this in normal standard Sage. If you're going to put a purchase invoice on, the same thing applies. You then create your project from there, or sorry, associate it to your project from there. We're going to do one of those in just a second. I'm just simply going to go in here and put my £1,500 invoice on. It's against my project, against my materials header. It's defaulted to the nominal code that's materials for that project, and therefore Sicon documents, I'm going to put a quick invoice in here. So we're just going to attach a copy of my invoice, a Sage logo. You can see I've got a few of those, and we're just going to save that away. If your supplier is a subcontractor, it will come up with all the subcontractor things at that point in time. But the reality is that I now have a brand new invoice processed with a document attached to it that relates to my project, and therefore when we come out of this screen, so I'm just going to save that. Kind of knew that that was going to happen, guys. I've got an API switched on, which we can ignore for the purpose of today's exercise.
That's what demos are for.
That's what demos are for. Just kind of knew that it was going to pop up. But now in my expenditure, we'll have a brand new invoice. So let me just refresh that just to make sure that it does actually come into play. So I'm just going to scroll right to the very bottom and you'll see our invoice 1st of December 2023 is therefore an actual cost sitting against my project. We know that there's a document attached to that. So we'll be able to see that in the Sicon Documents tab as well. But equally, I can navigate back to the invoice, to the supplier transaction inquiry screen, and view the invoice directly from here. All roads lead back to the same place for you. Now we're going to do that the other way around this time, just so that you can see that it is incredibly easy to use because everything is switched on to facilitate all of your transactions that are project related. If your transaction isn't project related, it will automatically default to what we call the non-applicable project, the bucket of costs that don't mean anything. Lots of our customers will take that non-applicable cost and actually spread that as an overhead, maybe, against all of the projects. But it's absolutely your choice. In here, now, we're just going to go into another one of my suppliers, Everest. So standard Sage. In goes my invoice. This time it's for £2,300. Pop in my reference number. Add a copy of my invoice. This time we'll have, again, by adding documents, by the way, guys, you can paste it in, you can drag and drop it in, you can scan it in. I'm just simply picking it up from where it already resides in my system, attach the file and choose the project that it relates to. So all of your projects are now visible to the guys that are actually processing the invoices, and they can go and choose the project of their choice. Which one should we have today? Let's have this Dum Central one, the redevelopment of my mental hospital. Terrible project title, Michelle. But despite that, we're simply going to go in and save that away. And again, this is what the other one was attempting to do. And this is only because I've got construction switched on, guys. We can ignore it for the purpose of today's exercise. It's all about associating an invoice to an application. Not interested in that today, so we're going to ignore the applications. And we're just going to come out of there. And this time we'll look back at it the other way, which is that we're going to go back into my project list. And this time we'll look for our Dundrum project. And again, back into my project where The project total screen shows me this is a project that we've got a little bit of concern about. We've got way more costs than we have revenue. For lots of our customers, actually, they don't care about revenue and they don't want to see the revenue. And it's all about costing, but it depends on the business and depends on what you want to be able to get out of it. This particular one, not making any money because we don't have any revenue, but in the expenditure, as you'll see, there's a whole ream of journals which have been posted as depreciation for fixed assets against this particular project. So lots and lots of costs coming from the depreciation of assets associated to that item. Here's our invoice sitting at the bottom, 1st of the 12th, 2023. Again, I can right click that and go back into the invoice, but equally as important, I can go back in here to the Sicon Documents tab and we can see our Everest invoice document at that level as well, together with all the other invoices which are applicable. There is, and again, I will try not to bore you with the detail, guys, because we don't want to take you more than the hour, but the reality is that the project solution could be quite large depending on the facilities that you want to be able to use. So when we go into the transaction entry side, we can create a project journal, we can do a rapid stock issue, we can generate billing transactions. So if you have incurred costs which you then want to charge out to your customer, we can automatically create the sales orders in relation to the charge for those items. I can enter in a timesheet. I can post my timesheet journals. The only thing that we don't post to the nominal is time. Many customers will bring in a journal from their payroll for their salary bill that goes directly into the nominal ledger. If that's the case, we don't want to double up on costs. What we actually want to do is to say, how many hours have we done by way of time? If we're collating the cost within our project, we don't want to post that anywhere else at all. But if you do want to do that because you're not bringing in that salary journal, then you can post the timesheet costs to your nominal as well. So it's a choice. We can also go in and look at our inquiry screen, so we can look from a project management perspective. We can view the projects from here. We can create estimates that we can convert to actual projects. So start incurring costs potentially before the project goes live is one thing, but actually estimating and quoting for that before it turns into a live project is also, it's the same sort of principle, same structure. We're planning for what we're about to do before we convert it into a project. You can create templates, as I promised you. And if you have created a template, rather than reinventing the wheel every time, we can simply create a project from a template. So here's my template for, this is a healthcare project. The new project number, because I don't have automatic numbering switched on, I'm just going to put in Test for Howard as my new project.
Yay.
Infamous in the system, Howard. We're going to copy the budgets, copy the memos, copy the project headers, copy the variations of the template that I have designed in the background, and simply create a brand new project called Test for Howard, which is now my blank canvas.
Yeah.
I don't have any transactions in here right now, but I do have the project headers from my template, and I do have all of that information. If I have maintained any budgets, if there is budget information in there, then the budgets will be brought forward. If I haven't, they're not. I can design them. We're simply going to save ours away, and we're just going to look in our screen, and there is my workspace redesign templated project now called Test for Howard, and that is my blank canvas. No costs, no revenue, nothing populating these tabs at this point. So the next time we put on a transaction, let's just put on a quick invoice again, one more time, guys. Let's do it for these guys at Corcoran Supplies. There they are. And you'll see that as soon as we do this, my ability to be able to choose that project, which is I've done a lot of tests, as you can see. So it's literally just going to search for the project, the customer, or the description. So our test for Howard will most likely be the last one that I see. There we go. Against materials, but in actual fact, we'll choose something different this time. We'll choose labour, and you'll see that as I choose labour and I tab forward, the nominal has changed because the default nominal for labour is different to that of materials. We can add our document again one more time. So I'm just going to, just because it's today, we may as well just show you the other ways of being able to do things. So we're just going to go into my drafts. We're going to choose any one of these with some kind of image attached to it. There's a picture of a kettle there, guys. Let's have that. So we're just going to pick it up and drag it in. That's Sicon Documents doing that. That's now attached. We'll save that. That all disappears. They didn't have any application switched on, so it's not causing me any pain. And if you just pop ourselves back into the project list one more time to my test for Howard, you'll see that that transaction from my nice blank canvas that had no transactions now has some actual expenditure sitting there, which we then see the detail of here, which again we can drill back into should we really wish to. Just to complete the process for us, guys, there's lots more that we could talk about, of course. This is where we manage those planned purchases, as I promised you. So we can manage a planned purchase, maintain our planned purchases, and create purchase orders for them. Our employees have, if I just go in and maintain my employees, this is your list of direct employee. Let's look at Lewis. Good old Lewis. There he is. So who is he? Where does he sit within our business? But more significantly, specifically for projects, how is he being costed? What's he being charged out at? He's costed at £150 an hour. That's probably his hourly rate that we charge. We pay him plus some overheads, some E's and R's that go alongside that. The charge out rate, however, is £2,500. So if I was to generate a billing transaction off the back of my project for labour work that Lewis had done, it would then pick up the charge rate for the sales order. Pay rates, qualifications, attachments, all sorts of stuff that we can attach to Lewis himself. But each employee is maintained and set up in there. We also have, as I promised you, our plant. This is our all items list. So this is plant that we own and plant that we hire in. This particular list, if I go into my hired in plant and tools, will show me everything that is currently on hire from various different suppliers and the end date that we had anticipated. In my demo environment, guys, everything's overdue, as you can probably see. If I create a new hire, we're just going to go in and choose my test for Howard project. Oh, I do that every time, clearly. Let's just scroll right to the very bottom. Next time I'll actually say test for Howard. Okay. So there's my project. Where are we going to get our item from? I normally get them from AMV Haulage. That's my supplier of hired in product. We're going to add our hire. It might be something that you've already got as a description. I'm going to add mine as a free text. It's going to be for my, we'll have a nice big crane. That's not normally something that somebody has. They normally hire in. So we're going to hire in a crane, a quantity of 1. The unit value is going to be £150 a day. It's probably way more expensive than that. And then I can give it a duration based on the start date and end date of the PO. So today till the end of the month, 30 days, include or exclude weekends, but it's the 30 days times the £150 equals £4,500 worth of committed expenditure to my project. I can generate the purchase order to AMV Haulage. Purchase order 4591 has now been created. I can confirm the receipt of the item having been received on site, the receipt date, we'll say is today, and the fleet number goes in should you wish it to. It's now on hire. That's its status as far as we are concerned. I can now create the ability for you to then off hire it, and it will create an automated email to the supplier to say, can you come and get this, please? I can then confirm collection. But the end result of all of this is that I'm going to have a history of everything that's gone on, when it was hired, when the purchase order was created, when the plant was received, when it was off hired, etc., etc. I can add any memos or any attachments to it. But more significantly, the cost of that item has now been intrinsically linked to my project. So let's just pop ourselves back into my project list, just so that we can see our, this time I'm not just going to write in test, it's going to be test for Howard, so that it's the only one. Oh, it's not, hold on. Let's actually write in test for Howard. There it is. There's my test for Howard project. And now we've got some more expenditure for the hire of our item. So of course, it's automatically created the header for plant, where it's a committed expenditure, where we'll see in the purchase order, we are indeed hiring that crane for 30 days. If it's less than 30 days, it will automatically adjust the purchase order and therefore the committed value accordingly. We can raise as many invoices as we like against it. That's plant, whistle stop tour of what plant does for you inside of projects. The project management tool will allow me to be able to go in and plan for things to happen. The period end routines will allow us to be able to go in and do that cost at completion accrual, revenue at completion accrual, and run my CVR inquiry. And then despite the fact that nobody likes a report anymore because they are point in time, some people still love reports, and therefore there are a number of reports which we've pre-configured for you so that you can indeed run your all project transaction report. You can run your budget reports to show you budgets by project, by header, profitability by customer, etc., etc. So your work in progress reports can indeed be achieved, but the preferred method these days is definitely these dashboards to be able to provide that real-time live reporting. I'm going to stop talking now, Howard. You'll be delighted to know. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. If there's any questions, please do let us know now.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, thanks very much for that, Michelle. And to just come back to the dashboards, yeah, a lot of people like to see the dashboards, but I think nearly every single site I talk to, they get on top of me for reports straight away.
Yeah.
So it's still there. They still have a requirement.
Yeah, it's still there.
It, you know.
Everybody wants them, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. So look, before we actually close out, as I say, we just wait a moment or two just to see if anybody has any specific questions. Look, just while we're waiting here, just a couple of things that always sort of stand out. The nice things that I see here every time I look at the Sicon Projects module is just how seamless it is with actually Sage 200. It doesn't look any different whatsoever. It's just all within the one screen, which is nice. But I think what can be appealing to some other users as well is, you know, it can sometimes appear very repetitive or daunting when they're building up a project very similar to the one they've done before. So the ability to be able to, you know, copy an existing template, or make a template from an existing project is a great sort of starting off point as well, you know. And it's something that it's something I want to look more at over time and sort of make some suggestions to some of our current clients.
I think it's also relevant, guys, and I know, like I say, as this is one of the demonstrations, one of the webinars for you in a series that the guys at DB are running, we are going to talk about approvals moving forward, and certainly speak to Howard about whether or not this is of interest to you. But lots and lots of my customers say that's great inside of Sage, Michelle, and for the finance people, for the operational people inside of Sage, it's brilliant. But we've also got some guys out on site or who are remote that also need to be able to see that level of information, not necessarily to transact, but to be able to see it. So as part of the approvals solution, we also have So this is approvals. It's a web-based solution. It does requisitions. It's all sorts of things which we're going to talk to you about another time. But the reason for taking you in here now is because projects is also part of that environment. So the non-Sage user, who's the project manager, that just needs to be able to see what's happened on this project. So he'll be able to see a full list of all of the projects. We're going to go in here and do my test for Howard again.
Do you know, every time you mention my name, I flinch, and it's not just because of you. I think it's just something from my childhood.
Quite possibly. There it is. There's our project. It's live. This is a live environment. I haven't had to export that out to this. It's talking directly to Sage in a live capacity, so that now when I go into my project inquiry screen, my project manager will be able to see that level of detail. Excuse me for doing this for the first time, guys. The first time you run it in the demo environment, it takes a little bit longer than I particularly like showing. But once you've run it for the first time, all the information is there for you. So everything that we've just done in Sage, I'm about 150 miles away from where my Sage server is, just doing this via approvals via the Wi-Fi. So in your project totals, you'll see what we've seen, and in your expenditure, you should see our plant hire for the crane for 30 days and our invoice for Corcoran supplies, so that the guys can see that level of detail and they can see the budgets and see where they are at any point in time. I thought worth noting.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll definitely be taking a look at that in a further webinar. And if anybody's looking at this from YouTube, it's probably up there already in the future.
Fabulous.
So look, I'll jump back here now. Let's have a look. So what we'll do is we'll obviously have a copy of the actual demonstration. It'll be going up on YouTube, as I alluded to earlier on. If you do have any other questions whatsoever, you know, please feel free to sort of contact me at howard@dbcomp.ie. As mentioned at the start as well, of course, we're happy to do, you know, one-on-one demonstrations, tease out what it is you specifically need, obviously, before we do those demonstrations, to make sure it's the right and suitable solution for you. But other than that, I'd like to thank Michelle today for covering our demonstration of the Sicon projects for Sage 200. Thank you, Michelle.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you all for attending today, and hopefully we'll talk to you real soon. Thank you very much, and good afternoon.
Great weekend, everybody. Thank you.